You're now listening to the Boys in the Booth podcast with your hosts, Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams. New episodes every Monday on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Good evening and welcome to episode 120 of the Boys in the Booth podcast. Cody, Abrams, and Melbourne with you as always. The trade deadline has come and gone. We hope you enjoyed our episode breaking down all of the big deals on deadline day. About 20 games or less to go in the season now. 5 weeks from today, I think, guys, until the postseason. Can't wait. Our division revisiting of our rankings continues with the Metropolitan division. So before we get into all that, how we doing?
Doing good, Harp. You know, the more things get loosened and the better the weather gets, the more busy I'm becoming. And it's certainly taken a little bit of a toll on me. I'm exhausted right now, so got to power through this one. But it's one of those good bad things, or bad good things.
Yeah, either way works. I'm also exhausted right now, but for different reasons. I was up last night until like 3 o'clock finishing a final take-home test for one of my classes. So I'm officially done one of 5 law school classes, which is great news because that means I only have 4 left. And of course, you know, put it to the last minute because that's what we procrastinators and perfectionists do. So I was up late and that's what happened. So today has just been a wasted day for me, and I was just looking forward to this episode because I took the time to listen to our previous episode on this, and guys, it was way off, but we're going to get into that. So overall, in a decent mood, but I'll be better tomorrow after I catch up on some sleep. Harp, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm tired too. It's Monday, but a good weekend. Went to the Senators and Panthers game, and I got to tell you, that is the biggest crowd I've seen at the Canadian Tire Center all season. And what a great game it was. Florida comes back, of course, and wins in a shootout. So that was a great game.
And before you move on from that too, I wanted to share one stat with you guys because if I don't share it now, I'll forget it. I was looking at this randomly today. Florida is the only team in the league right now that when trailing after 2 periods has come back 8 times. And when leading after 2 periods, they're the only team who has not, oh my God, this is brutal. When leading after 2 periods, they have not lost. So both ways, they're number 1 in terms of points percentage after trailing and winning. Or trailing, and I am fucking up this stat, guys. After trailing after 2 periods and after leading after 2 periods, they lead in win percentage in both cases. So they come back more than anyone else, and they haven't had any comebacks on them. It's a Monday, boys.
My loopy tiredness did not help there.
My loopy tiredness didn't.
Pretty crazy that's the biggest crowd you've seen, Harp, considering like in the last 10 years, they're probably on average the 2 lowest attendance in the league. Mm-hmm. So it's funny that combined they blow up.
And one more thing I want to say, Chad, you're up till 3 a.m. last night. Well, I did the same thing last Wednesday, I think it was, because I was working on our custom roster. So you can download the Boys in the Booth roster on Xbox, and Chad, you put some great graphics together of those ratings changes for the Atlantic, the Metro, and the Pacific division so far. So you can check that out on our Instagram.
And was late to work the next day.
Oh, okay. We're going to need to edit that out. Anyway, all right, boys, let's get into it. We'll kick it off with a little fantasy corner, and there's not really much for me to say because, Case, I was up against you last week, and I lost.
Yeah, just absolutely slaughtered them. I think like by 80 points or something like that. What's new? I think second most points in the league. Got me up into a playoff spot, and the race is on here. I think the 2 ways that I'm guaranteed to be in the playoffs now is if I win, I'm guaranteed in, and I could actually finish in 5th place. And if I lose, then if LVB or Remy lose, I'm in. So,
yeah. I was taking a look at that today. It's going to be tight, and right now only the top 4 teams in our league have clinched a playoff spot. So that means that Ball to the Wall, Bros Before Ahos, that's UK's, Will Nye the Science Guy, Barkov's Beauties, and the Bacchus Door Bandits all have a shot, and a legitimate shot, at making the playoffs. And even though Bacchus Door Bandits are sitting in 9th place right now, they have an equally good opportunity to make the playoffs. So it is going to be, like, I'm so excited to see how it shakes out, guys. And for me, last week, I went up against the Arizona Blackhawks, which is my brother-in-law Cameron, one of the worst teams in the league, but boy did he have a week, guys. And he was projected to beat me by about 20 points all week, and never a doubt, in my team, even though there were many doubts throughout the week. I came back and I beat him, and it was all because I messaged the group chat on Sunday and I said, hey, Case, who's going to win between New Jersey and whoever? Because I was looking at, and Montreal, because I was looking at John Gillies to pick up as a goaltender to get me some extra points. Well, he won, and that was fine, but thank God I didn't pick him up, because instead I picked up Jakub Vrana, who got 11 points in a 11-2 loss. So on the 2 goals that they scored, he got 11 points on that. And then Mitch Marner and Morgan Riley also went off for me that night. I got roughly 60 points in one night, and I came back and beat the Arizona Blackhawks.
Yeah, Chad, John Gillies didn't play. The Devils have such little confidence in him that they've played Nico Dawes on back-to-back games twice last week.
Wow.
That's tough. When I was looking at left wing lock, they project who the starter is going to be. It was John Gillies, but it wasn't confirmed.
Yeah, because they played 2 back-to-back games last week, and they played Dawes in both the 2 and then on Saturday. So you're like, oh, well, they have to play John Gillies on Sunday. No, let's go with the 20-year-old again, because we have no faith in John Gillies.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's tough.
Well, it worked.
Yeah, there you go. It worked.
Jeez. Chad, you mentioned the playoff race there. Did you want to do a run through of sort of the top half of the standings, or how did you want to do it?
Sure. Considering this is the last week of the regular season, I'll do the full standings all the way through. So
okay.
At number 1, it's me, the Multiple Scoregasms. Number 2, the Danbury Trashers. That's Dylan. Number 3, the Meatheads. They've had a bit of a fall from grace. That's Luke Sheridan. Number 4, Hat-Trick Swayze. That's your brother, the better Cody in the family. Number 5, Ball to the Wall. That's former guest on the pod, Alan Atmansky, having a good season. Number 6, that's our co-host, Bros Before Ahos. He did mention that he might be able to finish in 5th place when it's all said and done. Will Nye the Science Guy. That's my buddy Remy. He sits in 7th. Barkov's Beauties, that's Casey's boss, LVB. He's having a good season, looking to get into the postseason and stay in that 8th spot. Bacchus Door Bandits, that's Taylor Prosser in 9th. 10th and eliminated from the playoffs, most likely. I think it is official that he is eliminated from the playoffs. I'd have to check that. The Tampa Bay Three-Peats, that's Nate Gagne. Number 11, that is the worst of the Cody brothers. Harper, that's you. The 2021 Pepsi Cup scoring champ. Number 12, Arizona Blackhawks. I already mentioned that's my brother-in-law, Cameron Murray. 13, the Mail Order Brides, and still hoping to get into a playoff spot, even though he's been statistically eliminated for months now. That's Corey Morrell. And 14th and very last in the entire league, that's the Horny Town OnlyFans. That's Brandon Irving, and he's been locked out of his account since week 3.
And I play him this week. Let's go. All right, there we go. So let's get into taking another look at the Metropolitan division, guys. A tough division, and man, we were off on this one. So I'm going to bring up our original rankings first, and then we'll go through each of those teams in order of how we originally had them at the start of the season. And then we'll tell you where they are now currently in the standings. So, all right, we had the Islanders at 1, Carolina in 2nd spot, Washington at 3, Philadelphia in 4th, Pittsburgh in 5th, the Devils in 6th spot, in 7th, the New York Rangers, and then in 8th spot, the Columbus Blue Jackets. So, guys, let's start with the New York Islanders. We had them at 1. 2 Final Four appearances, but it's been a rough year on the island. Currently 6th in the Metropolitan Division, 65 points in 64 games. Case, the Islanders.
Yeah, listening back to this episode is like one of the worst times I've ever felt about my hockey opinion ever, because I was just so wrong on my individual rankings, and then collectively we were also terrible because we all thought the Islanders were going to be number one. And you want to know why I think it is? It's like the gambling mentality of like, well, I've gone red 3 times in a row and I've been wrong every time, so this one's I gotta go black here, whatever you want to say, because every year we dump on the Islanders system. We hate that they can't score any goals and they just play defense all the time. And I think this time we finally just gave in to the last 3 years of how it's gone, and we said, okay, the Islanders are good. We like the system. It works. We love their goaltending tandem. We love their top defensive pairing. We love the depth of this team, adding guys like Parise and getting Chara and Palmieri's back the whole year. We had a lot of positives, so we just felt we had to put them at first because they made a good run in the playoffs, I guess. But I know we put them at 1, but all things said and done, we did say that they're the opposite of the Leafs. It's like questionable if they're going to make the playoffs, but if they do, they're going deep. And that's what we said. And well, they're not making the playoffs, and so they will not be going deep.
Yeah, the tricky thing about the Islanders coming into this season is that they played their first 20 some odd games on the road.
13 game road trip season.
Yeah, so okay, I boosted it a little bit there, but that's not fun for anyone. They had a horrendous start to the season, and as of late, they've been playing some pretty good hockey. They've been winning a decent amount of games, but the playoff picture is done right now, which is too bad. But I think the Islanders will come back and be relevant again next year. I think this is just kind of a wash for them, and I think they recognize that, the fact that they didn't really sell at the deadline, and I think they're confident in the group that they have, so and their system and their goalies as well. So, I think they'll be relevant next year. But yeah, first place, we were this was an easy conversation for us when I listened back. Yeah. We all agreed that first place was easy, to put them there because they had just lost to Tampa Bay and in the playoffs, and they looked like game 7, and they looked like a juggernaut, right? But the one thing that Casey brought up, and we did say, was listen, this team excels at playoff hockey, but they've never been known for scoring, and that's consistent this year in the regular season, and so we've seen that. And before I pass it on to you as well about New York, I just want to say that in that episode, listening back, I completely forgot about this. They were your cup pick for this year. Yeah,
talk about getting overexcited about back-to-back Final Four appearances. I was way off on that one. But, you kind of said it there, Chad, they're one of those teams, and there are a few of those teams in this division that, this year is just a wash for them, but they're going to be competitive next season, whether that's, getting back to being a playoff contender or taking the next step. And it's a nice little hint for another team we'll be talking about. But yeah, Barry Trotz is going to get another chance. Lou Lamoriello is going to make his tweaks in the offseason, and they'll be fine. But this year, their age has really shown. They had a tough start, 13 games on the road because the new building was getting put together on the island. And it's just been a rough year for the Islanders, but they'll be back next year.
I don't know, their age showed, but their main moves they've made in the last little bit are re-signing Parise and Cal Clutterbuck. It's I guess keep doing it. But to me, where they really stumbled was the youth did not live up to their expectations. Barzal and Beauvillier, they were no-shows in the first half of the season. Kyle Palmieri, no youth there anymore, but he was he had 2 goals in the first 40 games or something ridiculous like that. He was definitely struggling as well. I don't know if it's playing on the road or what it is for him, because he just wasn't himself. And there's a few guys that were just not getting it done. Anders Lee had a tough start to the season. He's certainly turned it around now. He's got 25 goals or something like that. So a lot of guys struggled early on, and it all counts. Those wins early on in the season, they matter.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Another big weakness for them, just before we move on to our next team, is the left side on their blue line. And, it's great having a veteran like Zdeno Chara playing with an up-and-coming right shot D and Noah Dobson, but Chara should not be playing in your top four. I mean, that's just, he's too old and doesn't have enough miles left for that. So, talking about weaknesses, that is certainly one for them. But a tough year for the Islanders, but they'll be back to form next season. We're sure of it. All right. The Carolina Hurricanes, we had them in second and currently first in this division, 93 points in 65 games. They had a pretty quiet deadline, just the one move, getting Max Domi for basically nothing, a bag of chips. But this team is a contender. They're well coached. We know that, so let's get into Carolina.
Yeah, they got Domi in stoppage time, too. I think it was 2 minutes left on the clock when they submitted their trade. So they waited to the last second to actually do something. But I think the main reason why we were hesitant on putting Carolina at number one was they took a step back on defense, losing Dougie Hamilton and bringing in Ethan Bear to replace him. And we were so hesitant on their goaltending. And how many times have we said it in the last couple of weeks? Like, you just can't put a lot of weight on goaltending, like, at all, because we were hesitant on Anderson because he was struggling in Toronto. Ranta's hurt all the time, so we weren't really sure how that was going to work out. Well, Anderson's like a Vezina caliber goalie right now, and is certainly making a huge impact on this team and where they are. And first place is a lot to do with him. And we were definitely right about this team getting better on forward and deeper, that is. And there's a lot of guys contributing on offense. So they're kind of a more fun team to watch this year, in my opinion, based off, like, they've kind of changed their image of being a very good D-core to just a fun, high-flying hockey team.
Yeah, and I think they're very balanced, too. And I think, looking back, not signing Dougie Hamilton, like, at the time, we thought that was the worst thing they could have done, because Dougie Hamilton was, like, a top 10 defenseman in the NHL by all accounts and in a lot of different metrics. So, not signing that player, like, we kind of shook our heads. And, Case, obviously you were happy that he went to New Jersey, but they replaced him, like you said, with Ethan Bear and Tony DeAngelo. And I think Tony DeAngelo right now has been one of their most valuable defensemen because of the offense that he's been able to produce this season at an incredibly low price tag, certainly lower than whatever Dougie makes, and it's comparable production from a guy who, teams really didn't want to touch because of the whole political thing with Tony DeAngelo, but he's been fantastic this year, and it's really helped them.
It's comparable production because Dougie Hamilton missed like 20 games because his jaw was hanging on by a thread. But
yeah, I have him in fantasy, dude. I know all about his injuries. It's brutal. But yeah, Carolina, like we were a bit concerned about their goaltending. We shouldn't talk about goaltending in terms of like team projections because we're always wrong. Like, it's hard to be right with goaltending, and we'll see that later as we go through these rankings. But yeah, guys, like, we settled on number 2 because there were a few question marks. They're in first right now. They're up on Pittsburgh by 3 points, and so I think we weren't totally right with this one, but we were pretty close. So give us a pat on the back for this one.
I am going to say that there are 5 teams in this division that we were wrong about solely because of goaltending.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm gonna like, that's a little
that's fair
for the rest.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, definitely. No, I mean, not much else to say on my end about the Hurricanes. They're fast, they're exciting. A good back end. They're well coached, and even though they had a quiet deadline, again, I was a little surprised they didn't do a lot to upgrade. They are certainly a contender in the East, and so. And they're one of those teams too. I think Frank Saravalli brought this up, that like they've been pretty consistent all year. They had a really good start and they've kind of just been cruising along. There hasn't really been a dip at all in production or anything. They've had a really nice season. And yes, we were very wrong about that goalie tandem of Ranta and Anderson, and we were all just like, what, when they traded Alex Nedeljkovic?
Yes.
But it's worked out for them, and losing Dougie Hamilton and bringing in Bear and D'Angelo has worked out for them as well. So,
and like, to wrap up, Nedeljkovic has not been very good this season.
It's like Seattle and it's like St. Louis and every other team we've talked about. Like, Nedeljkovic has been one of the worst goalies in the league, and he was a Calder candidate last year. It's like, I'm never going to look at a goalie again.
It's impossible. Like, we should just, like, it's fun too, because you see who's good right now, but that's how it needs to be framed. Who's good right now? That doesn't predict who's going to be good in the future. Unless you're, know, Vasilevsky or Hellebuck or, those consistent guys.
Yeah.
All right, so we were pretty close with this next team. We had the Washington Capitals in third in our preseason rankings, and they're currently fourth in the division. So they've got 84 points in 67 games, 5 points back of third, or of the Rangers for third spot. And, I think the Capitals' play was a little bit concerning before the deadline. But they've really picked it up as of late. They've been playing really well. The goaltending has been a lot better, speaking of that. And Backstrom is back going again, and they look really good again. So thoughts on the Capitals?
I think all four of our main points we talked about with the Caps, we were wrong about. But we are only one off on our projections in the standings. And we did almost put them higher than Carolina because we like their goaltending tandem so much. Wrong about that. How about the youth infusion that's going to come in on this team with Lapierre and McMichael? Wrong about that. Lapierre isn't even playing, and McMichael has like 12 points in 60 games or something like that, 19 maybe. So we were wrong about that. We were worried about their D-core. They lost Brendan Dillon, and it just didn't look very strong there. Well, wrong about that. Fairvary comes out of nowhere. He's sick. It's like, everything we said about this team is off slightly. The last one being they're going to miss Backstrom for the first half of the season. Psych, Ovi scores like 60 goals in 14 games.
Best start of his career.
It doesn't matter if Backstrom's there. So this one was definitely a head scratcher, but they're good. Like, we knew they were good. They are good. We just it didn't play out the way we thought it was going to.
Good teams find a way, and Washington is definitely one of those teams. And I remember thinking back and listening back to what we talked about Washington. One of the things was, they're in a win now window, and they might have 2, maybe 3 years left of prime like production from some of their top players. I think that window is extended because good teams find players to play. Faravari case, like you mentioned, is a great example. And Ovechkin, like I said, had the best, literally one of the best starts of his career, if not the best, points production-wise. And he's 36 or whatever. Like, unbelievable. This team is good. They're going to continue to be good. We were only one off in the standings. And, I think we were pretty confident in saying that they're a playoff team. And they are. And they're only, 5 points back of the Rangers, who have had incredible goaltending all year, and I don't think are a playoff team without that goaltending. So you could argue that Washington maybe even deserves to be in that 3 spot. So again, let's give ourselves a pat on the back. We're pretty close with this one.
No, for sure. And you know what? I think when you look at the Capitals, they're kind of flying under the radar as a contender. I saw a few people kind of ripping them for the moves they made at the deadline, bringing back Johansson and bringing Johan Larsson from Arizona as well. But, I like the Capitals. They did it back in 2018 where they got over the hump against Pittsburgh, and then they just rolled on from there. And I think that they are a team that, if they can just win a round, like the opening round, and kind of get their confidence going and get rolling, that they could go back and do it again. So
let's not forget that I have these guys. Sorry to cut you off, Harp.
That's okay.
I have these guys as a future to win the conference. So,
oh, do you?
Yeah.
Have you seen?
Nice.
Have you guys seen their record with and without Mantha this season? It's incredible. I saw it the other day just randomly, and I wish I should have pulled it up for this, but essentially without Mantha, they're roughly a 500 team, and with Mantha, they're like one of the best in the league, which is weird because you look back on that trade, and I think we can all say that like Washington probably lost that trade because Vrana is a really, really good player. Plus, there were 2 picks going that way.
Yeah.
But
I'm just laughing because I'm thinking back to that trade. I think both teams won that trade. They're both better off.
Yeah,
they did.
But
yeah.
I guess that extra 250 pounds really helps Washington win some hockey games.
Yeah, really?
Yeah. No, exactly. And another guy to mention, I'm pretty sure he has the best plus minus in the NHL this season. That's Nick Jensen. Like, you talk about the back end and how concerned we were about that. Fioravari, like you mentioned, Case, real nice player for Washington, playing with John Carlson, a young defender, and then Jensen, who, we were kind of looking at and that 4-year contract at $2 million plus doesn't look too good. He's had a really nice bounce back season as well, and is a big part of his team.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up because I ripped on him in the on the previous episode. So I said he's not the Nick Jensen that we're used to seeing in the preseason, and I'm not looking forward to his season. So
also plus minus, great stat. Wow, really dug for that one. Really useful. I'm just bugging you, Harp. I'm just bugging.
No, I know. Okay. Next team, and oh boy, it's been a rough season for these guys. The Philadelphia Flyers. So currently 7th in the division, actually tied with New Jersey for last spot in the Metro. 53 points in 66 games, and we picked them to be 4th in this division before the start of the season. Now, they made some nice moves in the offseason. I think injuries have certainly played a role in how awful their year has been. Couturier and Ryan Ellis, the 2 most notable names out of the lineup. Man, it's been a tough season for the Flyers. Case.
Yeah, where do you start? I guess we had this team higher because we thought this was, the last year for their core, or maybe second last year. So we thought they'd make a really hard push. They did do a lot in the offseason to try to get better, at least on the D core. And it didn't really work out. And like you said, injuries really hurt this team. And goaltending, once again, Carter Hart, beginning of this season was pitiful. So that certainly didn't help the Flyers' case here. And I think it's the start of them being the worst team in this division for the next 5 years, in my opinion. I don't see a lot of positives for this team.
Yeah, they're kind of on the wrong side of where you want to be if you're going to contend in this division, which is pretty tight top to bottom. I mean, that was something we brought up in our first conversation about this, how the division is pretty tight. Whether it's good or bad, it's tight throughout. So not a great position to be in for the Flyers right now. Something I mentioned in that episode when we first talked about it was that the Flyers allowed the most goals against in the NHL last season. So when we talked about the moves that they made on D, bringing in Ristolainen and shaking up that whole core, really all we could think was, well, it can't be the worst in the NHL, right? If you're making a change, it's going to be better than worst in the NHL. And, so far it has been. They're 8th worst right now in terms of goals against. So there is a minor improvement there. But the Flyers in 4th place, again, I remember saying that they miss the playoffs one year and then they make the playoffs the next year, and then they miss and then they make. And they've been doing that for the longest time. And it's funny if you actually look back on it, it's a weird pattern for this team. So that was another reason. I remember saying, the Flyers can make the playoffs because they didn't last year, and kind of a weak argument, but it's funny looking back. I do want to say I had the Flyers at 6th in my rankings, and I was convinced to put them 4th. But either way, we're still a bit disappointed by how they performed this season. And again, Case, it's another team. You talk about goaltending that kind of skews the whole thing, and it really has this season. And talking about Giroux as well, and we all know he got traded to Florida. That made me sad listening back to that, thinking this could be the last shot that they have as a group to get this done. And now that shot is gone. They blew it. Giroux played his 1,000th game there and then got shipped off to a real contender. And it's just sad because it's the downfall of a good team that never really got over the hump, and that's scary for a team. It's a scary position to be in, and it makes me sad.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, we all heard Bobby Clark rip Ron Hextall and, for some of the decisions he made. And I think for the most part, we talked about it before, like he stocked the cupboards on his way out. And, I think from Bobby Clark, that was a move to back Chuck Fletcher, because obviously he's been under scrutiny all season. But, they do have some young players that just haven't really taken the next step, and it's these guys that we're kind of waiting on, like a Morgan Frost, an Isaac Ratcliffe, some of these guys that we're still waiting on, and it feels like they've been around for a while. So honestly, I could see Philadelphia getting the first overall pick, and I think it'd be really good for this franchise to kind of pump some new life into them.
Yeah, it's tough to think back to saying maybe 4 years ago, we're saying that Philadelphia has the best prospect pool in the league. The Athletic was saying that, we were saying that, everyone kind of agreed on it. It was like them and Minnesota. Well, look at Minnesota now, or LA, those three teams. Look at LA and Minnesota, look at what their youth are doing for them. And now look at Philadelphia, and it's like they're in the basement right now, and I wouldn't say that their prospect pool is that good anymore. So it's a scary position for sure.
No, yeah. Definitely. Now, Owen Tippett looks good early on. Sorry, Chad. And Cam York has looked pretty good on the back end this season. One guy I wanted to mention as well, not really a prospect, but just a great story, is Hayden Hodgson, who got a goal and an assist in his first NHL game in St. Louis, and got into a fight, I think, the night after against Tanner Jeannot, by the way, who he's been compared to because he was in the ECHL before, played for 6 different East Coast Hockey League teams, and got a shot in the NHL. So a nice little story for the Flyers. Just wanted to mention that quickly. Chad, sorry, you wanted to jump in there.
Yeah, just 2 things. It's funny you mentioned Shane Wright. Like, this could be a team to draft him first overall. They did in the most recent franchise mode I was playing in, so I thought that was kind of funny. I've seen Shane Wright in a Flyers uniform recently in the game, which is kind of cool. And also, too, I wanted to say that Chuck Fletcher, like I've already said, is one of the worst GMs in the league. Like, they desperately need a new general manager here to turn this thing around. Because if you are going to seriously go through a rebuild, and we've seen it with Montreal, you need a new management group.
Promote Danny Briere. You just hired him, and make him your full-time GM. He's been interviewed other places, Montreal and Arizona, and former player, a great one at that. I think he'd be great. Just a young, fresh voice for that organization. Anyway, we'll see. But I think it's safe to say, guys, that like the next couple of years could be more the same for the Flyers, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the Pittsburgh Penguins. And I'm probably the most guilty out of the three of us for being way too critical of the Penguins and counting them out. It is stupid. I do it. I've done it for the past 3 years, and I don't know why. I am done counting out this team. Second place in the division currently, 3 points back of first place. They had that 11-2 pounding against the Detroit Red Wings, 90 points in 67 games. The Penguins are poised to go on a big playoff run. They look like a Stanley Cup contender right now. Let's talk about the Penguins.
Well, Harp, you're about 8 months behind Chad on that realization of do not count the Penguins out, because I know that was Chad's mentality. He was like, I'm sick of saying they're done, like their core is over. It's too old, whatever, because Chad had him in 4th, I remember from the episode. And yeah, it's like, don't count these guys out ever. But let's talk about goaltending. Another team that we saw how bad their goaltending was last year, and we were like, I don't know how this team can be good with that tandem again. Well, Yari's sick again. He's a good goalie. It's like, yeah, you just can't make this shit up with goaltending. So, yeah, stop relying on goaltending for your picks. That's my realization. And yeah, the Penguins just got better. They added Rick Hell, like that.
Sneaky
who had a
move.
Goal and 2 assists playing alongside of Malkin the other night. It's like,
yeah,
I don't count this team out. They're very good. They're very deep. They turn guys into gold every single year, and now they have goaltending. So it's like, what do you do?
Yeah. Good teams find guys to play and make them good. Like we've been saying this about Washington and Pittsburgh for so long. It's like we just have to accept it now. They're just going to find guys who are going to be good. Like Case, I remember, like I can't remember exactly when this was, probably multiple times on the podcast, you bringing up like, you know, jokingly, oh yeah, you know, Teddy Fluger over to Rich Boger, and like that's the Penguins' fourth line, and oh yeah, they're both on pace for 30 goals. Yeah. It's like they just find guys.
Exhibit A this year is Evan Rodriguez.
Yeah.
Like, every single year, at least we knew who Evan Rodriguez was because, you know, Toronto,
Leafs
but like
legend,
Leafs legend, but like
Sabres.
every single year, Chad, what did you say? Anyways,
he was a Sabre too.
Yeah.
Sorry, Case, continue.
Sabres didn't process in my head as relevant for some reason. No, it's like you said, Chad. It's like over to Ronnie Johnson, and Johnson passes over to Fluger, and it's you watch a Penguins game, you're like, I don't know who half the team is, but boy, are they good.
Yeah. And I remember in that episode, guys, when we talked about like these rankings, I remember being pissed off because prior to that season, like in the playoffs, I picked a bunch of guys from Pittsburgh. Like I picked Crosby, Letang, and I'm pretty sure Gensel as well on my fantasy team, like just a playoff pool that I did with some friends. And because I was expecting them to go deep because they're a really good playoff team, but they didn't get goaltending. You remember Tristan Jarry floated one up the middle of the ice, turned it over, and then they scored on essentially an empty net, and that was the end of the Penguins that year. But I've been saying since then, that was the turning point for me, and maybe this will be the turning point for Harp today, that if the Penguins get average goaltending, they're a dominant team. They finished 5th in the NHL last season, and this year, right now, let me just check, they're probably right up there as well. In terms of like overall, they're 4th right now with 90 points in the NHL. And Tristan Jarry has been one of the best goaltenders in the NHL, which again, like came out of nowhere because he was so bad last season. But right now he's ranked 7th in the NHL in goals saved above expected, my favorite and least favorite stats. So the Penguins are able to get it done, guys. And again, like come playoff time, we can't count these guys out. Like whoever plays them in the first round, it's looking like it'll likely be New York or Washington. Wouldn't Washington be fun, by the way? Another series of those two. But whoever plays them, like it's gonna be a hard fought series if this team gets goaltending, and I think they will.
Yep. Well, everyone in that organization realizes that this may be their last kick at the can with this group. Like Malkin and Letang, their contracts are up at the end of the year. I want to talk about Letang for a second because, you've got the big four being considered for the Norris Trophy: Yossi, Makar, Hedman, and oh my God, who's the fourth? Adam Fox. Sorry, but the fifth guy, I would say, who kind of has an outside shot at it would be Letang. He is having an unbelievable season for the Penguins. And with the goaltending, I don't think it's just Jarry. I think they have a really solid battery. Casey DeSmith has been good as well.
Yeah, that's not what the stats say, but DeSmith is a decent goalie, and he can be big at certain times. The one thing I wanted to say about this team, though, is that they currently have 4 guys who are scoring at over a point per game pace. And Chris Letang, while having an incredible season, isn't even one of those guys. He's scoring at a .89 point per game pace. And actually, Case, talking about guys that we made up in franchise mode, Valtteri Pushtin is also a point per game for the Penguins, but he's only played 1 game. So they technically have 5 guys at a point per game right now, which is absurd. It's absurd.
Sure, I'm not going to count that 5th guy whatsoever, but I don't know. We've talked about the end of this core for so long that I'm starting to think it's a myth. And why would Malkin care where he goes? He's barely cared about learning English. I think he's fine with sticking around in Pittsburgh, and I think I've heard him say that he's not that interested in money next year anyway. So we'll see what the core decides to do, but it's like became one of those conversations. I'm like, I don't even know if I'm going to listen anymore because it feels like a broken record.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Alrighty, let's move on to our next team, and it is none other than the New Jersey Devils. So we had them in sixth before the start of the season, and it's been a rough year in Jersey. 53 points in 66 games, again tied with Philly for last in the division. They're going to have another high draft pick this year. Jack Hughes turning into a star in front of our eyes. Jesper Bratt has had an unbelievable season for these guys as well. Dawson Mercer, outside shot at the Calder Trophy. So the Devils, I think, we talked about the Islanders, a one-off season. I think it's that for the Devils case, and they'll be a team next year that could get into a playoff spot and really take that next step. Like we thought they would this year. So let's start with you, obviously, with the Devils.
Let's talk about goaltending. This team, man, like they're cursed for bringing in goalies. They bring in Crawford. He retires before the season starts. They bring in Bernier. He gets a handful of games in and then has season-ending injury. Blackwood, he has an incredible season, battles injury, comes back. More injuries, like right when you thought he was going to be good. So he's missed most of the year. For a while there, they were running with a tandem of a 20-year-old and a 21-year-old, Schmid and Dawes. Then they bring in John Gillies. He's terrible. Wedgwood, that is such a weird thing that keeps happening. Like, let's not bring him back anymore.
It's the Michael Hutchinson of New Jersey, by the way.
100%. And then every time you trade him, he plays the best game of his life. But I think they're 31st in team save percentage, which is the crux of this team. And then there's injury. Like Jack Hughes missing, I think it was like 20 games with his shoulder injury, or 15 or whatever it is. He came back and is now like one of the best players in the league, at least playing like it. Dougie Hamilton missing 20 games with a broken jaw. Heischer's been out. They just got Miles Wood for the first game of the season last year. I know a lot of people laugh at Miles Wood, like when I say that's a big piece, but he's so much more important to that team than you think he is. He's a huge leadership presence. Jack Hughes said it was finally a sense of normalcy because Miles Wood was back. And this guy, he was the 25th most goals off the rush the last 3 years. And I think it was like 45 on ozone entries and like chances off the rush. He really is a workhorse, hits like crazy, and is one of the fastest guys in the league. It was like, despite his size. So they finally got him back. There's just been countless injuries, and then goaltending has been god awful. I do not understand how Mark Recchi still has a job as the power play coach, because that power play has almost given up more shorthanded goals than scored power play goals. It makes me sick. I actually wish they would decline penalties. Like, it's brutal. Every time I see a penalty drawn, I'm like, oh no! Oh god! Oh
yeah. They're
better at 5-on-5 than on the power play.
They are. The two shorthanded goals that the Leafs scored against them the other night must have been tough. Like, I could just watch it. Like, they couldn't get into the zone, and then when they did, they turned it over, and it really felt like Jack Hughes would carry the puck, enter the zone, look for a guy, and have no success in that. And so clearly there's some discombobulation with the power play, and they'll figure that out. They've got some good players. But, thinking back to our talk about New Jersey, Casey had them in fourth. Might have been a little New Jersey bias there in your individual rankings.
Dude, I think they'll be there next year. It was just if they had the Rangers goaltending, they'd be in the spot the Rangers are in right now. They've scored more goals per game than the Rangers, and I think they are better on the penalty kill. And it's like, if they had Shesterkin, they're in third place.
I agree. I think if Arizona had Shesterkin, they're also a cup contender because he's that good this season. But
slow down.
Okay, I'm just teasing you a bit. I think the Devils are really good, and they're going to be good in the future, but they're just not quite there yet because of all the things you just mentioned. A lot of injuries, a lot of bad luck throughout the course of the year. But thinking back to our conversation, I know we talked about the fact that, a lot of things had to go right for the Devils this year for them to be, in the playoff conversation. So we talked about a lot of breakout candidates. Jack Hughes. Well, I think it's safe to say that that's happened. Not over the course of an entire season's worth of production because he's had injuries, but in terms of the last 30 games or whatever, he's been dominant. One of the best players at his age group, as a 20-year-old, in the last decade or whatever. He's been extremely
in the last 30 years, the only people to put up a 1.10 point per game pace in their age 20 or younger season is I think it's Ovechkin, Crosby, Stamkos, Yager, and someone else ridiculous like that. And Jack Hughes.
Yeah, so there you go. That's a breakout right there. No more talk about breakout candidate Jack Hughes. He just broke out, okay? We talked about a few other guys, though, and Yoni Kokkonen was one. Jesper Bratt was one. He's having a really good year as well, by the way.
Yeah, it's over a point per game.
Exactly. Yep. So there's been a lot of guys that we talked about over the course of a season who have to break out, and a few of them did. A few of them didn't. So that was sort of the main point. It's a lot of things have to go right for this Devils team who is on the very end of their rebuild and are looking to contend. That's why they got Dougie Hamilton. That's why they solidified goaltending and got Jonathan Bernier. But not everything went right. In fact, a lot of things went wrong. So that's why they're in the position they are. Next year, though, I don't know if I want to say this yet, but Case, I think I would be confident putting them in the fourth spot in this division next year. But my mind might change.
I'm trying to lower expectations because I feel like I'm excited every year. But next year, man, they've got the best AHL team in the league. It's going to be a bloodbath come time of training camp because there's so many guys who are just trying to make this team, and it's a logjam on forward with skilled young guys like Fabian Zetterlund and Alex Holtz and Nolan Foote, Tice Thompson. All these guys are fighting for 2 spots, and it's going to be exciting to watch. And they're only going to get better. I know they're absolute dog shit this year. I was definitely off the mark, but I thought Mackenzie Blackwood would be Mackenzie Blackwood again, and things would be all hunky-dory, but didn't really work out.
So, Case, I listened to Ken Donico last week on Sportsnet, and I really enjoyed listening to him. And he just kind of said a few things to sum up the Devils that it's just been injuries and just nothing has gone right, like we said. But Nico Daws looks like an NHL goaltender right now. Jack Hughes is becoming a star, like we said. And Nico Hischier as well. We haven't really talked about the captain, but his two-way game is really coming along, and this is a guy who could be a future Selke Trophy winner as well, and is a big part of this team. So they're going to be in it next year. And Case, one more question I have for you: do you think Mackenzie Blackwood is your number one goaltender next season?
There's been a lot of talk that it's not the case, but I think it's so hard to get a goalie that you got to run with them and at least first half of the season, first chunk of the season. I don't know if they're going to be able to pick up anyone in the off season, but hopefully Bernier's healthy by then, and then you do have a 1-2-3 punch there with Dawes, and even Akira Schmid is a year or two away from being an NHL backup goalie. So there's a lot of competition there, and I think Mackenzie's got one more year, so I think he is around next year, and then a decision's got to be made on that front for sure.
Yeah, Dawes looks good. That's for sure. So thank goodness for that. All right, moving on from the Devils to the New York Rangers. We had them in 7th before the season started, And man, they're a good hockey team. Again, the goaltending, we keep talking about it. That's a big factor. Igor Shesterkin has been unbelievable. They've got 89 points, in 66 games. They made a couple of big additions at the deadline, bringing in Andrew Kopp, Tyler Mott, and Justin Braun. Frank Vetrano looks really good as well, guys. They picked him up just before the deadline, scored 2 goals in their win against the Sabres last night. So what do we think of the Rangers?
I am going to live and die with the thought that they are only here because of their goaltending. I really think that they'd be in the 5th spot if it wasn't for Shesterkin, for sure. I don't have a lot to love about the team, but I don't really have a lot to hate about the team. They do kind of struggle scoring considering who they have on their team. But it's just a weird mix with them, and they seem to not know how to develop young guys either. And it's really showing, but I think they are deeper and probably better after the deadline, so maybe they will make a good little push here as long as Shesterkin keeps what they're doing. But I don't know. I really think without Shesterkin, this team is on the edge of a playoff spot.
I completely agree, and I've been saying this for a long time. We all have, because Shesterkin's been so good this season, even though I've got a nice Rangers t-shirt behind me there from Goodwill. It was like $2. But the one thing that just makes no sense to me about the Rangers is that they don't play their young stars at all still, even after a coaching change. So I remember when we talked about this, the thing I said, and I was a bit more optimistic, I think, on the Rangers than you guys might have been, or we're at least kind of close. And I said they're not that bad of a team, but they have to develop these guys, because we're not sure if they're going to be better coming into this season, but we do know that they're going to be older, and older for these young talented players like Kaapo Kakko and like Alex Lafreniere is usually a good thing, right? But in New York, like you said, Case, it hasn't been a good thing because they don't really know how to develop their players. Last season, Alex Lafreniere was playing roughly 13 minutes a night for this team. This season, he's playing just shy of 14 minutes a night, guys. This is a talented player. You need to play in your top 6, and it's not happening. He's playing third-line minutes. And same with a guy like Kaapo Kakko. He's playing 16 minutes a night. And both of those guys are hardly getting any power play time. So, to me, I think they have a decent team on paper. I don't think they're a good playoff team without Shesterkin, but I don't think they're terrible either. I think they're about middle of the pack. But I don't even know now next season, if I'm thinking about my projections for next season, where I would put them, because if they don't play Lafreniere or Kakko or any other of their difference makers, and they continue to play, Chris Kreider, he's been fantastic this year, but if they can continue to play, those top 2 lines without those guys, then I just don't really know what to expect of this team if they got average goaltending, because you can't expect Shesterkin to be that good next season. He's having the best season in the history of the goal saved above expected stat right now. They started tracking in 2007. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it really is. And I also just can't see Chris Kreider living up to this next year as well. So it's he's such a big piece of where they are this season with 44 goals. It's I just don't see that being a thing again next year.
He's having a huge season, but that's a long-term contract, and it's only going to get worse with age, that's for sure. So, they certainly lean on the goalie, as we know. I said it last night, Alex Georgiev has been god-awful for this hockey team, and I don't think he's with them after this season. I think there's been some issues there with him, but they obviously lean on the number 1 goalie. They lean on the number 1 defenseman, Panarin, Zibanejad, and Kreider, and then it's just everybody else from there. They went out and they got some toughness, but it's kind of worked, with Gaudreau and bring in Tyler Mott at the deadline, and Jacob Trouba just it seems like he's just been doing nothing but pounding the crap out of guys all year. It seems like he's Yeah, like you see highlights of them with these big open ice hits every week. It seems like they're a good team, no question. I like how they took a big swing and brought in Andrew Copp. I still can't believe they gave up Pavel Buchnevich. I don't understand that at all. But you know what? The moves that they made have worked. It's certainly too bad that they're not using some of their young high draft picks a little bit more, but they're a good team, and Shesterkin certainly is capable of stealing a round or two for these guys.
If they can figure out these young guys, Lundqvist and Miller on top of the two we've already mentioned and a handful of others, it's like this Hudson River rivalry is going to be a lot of fun to watch over the next 5 to 10 years. It's exciting, but it's going to cause a lot of stress for me.
Yeah, no kidding. And Harp, last point on this, you mentioned the Buchnevich trade for Sammy Blais. Like, that seems like a trade you make if you're making room in the top 6 for Alex Lafreniere, doesn't it? But then they didn't. So, like, to me, that makes zero sense. And also, Case, to your point about Kreider, inevitably regressing next season to what his career pace is, that's obviously going to happen. 22 of his 44 goals this season are on the power play. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's hard to keep up for sure. Last thing I want to say,
that's wild.
Last thing I want to say about the Rangers before we move on here and just plow through this last team is, I think that Capo Caco is more NHL ready and maybe even have a higher ceiling. And he's been playing against men the last few years, so I think he's going to be better than Jack Hughes. Yeah, how'd that work out for you, comment warriors? You fucking idiots.
There's some hate there.
Is it too soon to give him that bust label?
Yes.
It's a really nice city.
Yes, it's too soon because he doesn't play. He needs to be put in favorable positions. Like, I'd like to see the quality of competition he plays against. I'd like to see his offensive and defensive zone starts and things like that, and make a true and do a true analysis on the player. But just looking at time on ice, he doesn't play enough to say that he's a bust. He hasn't been given a fair opportunity, and same with Lafreniere.
Mm-hmm. I think one last thing. I think that is due in large part to the way the hockey operations are ran now, because the owner, James Dolan, got a little impatient, right, and axed Gorton and Davidson, and then Drury came in and made a whole bunch of moves, and so that just slides down Lafreniere and Caco even more. So I think if they stayed with the previous regime, it might be a different conversation. But they're a good hockey team. And again, Shesterkin could steal a round or two for them. For sure. Regardless if Capo Caco is a bust or not, I don't think he is. He's just not even on the same stratosphere as Jack Hughes. Oh, so God, no. I just had to make that comment to look back at all the amount of times I was pulling hair out reading comments back near that draft and the last 2 years on top of that. So it's just me getting a little bit of revenge versus any one of the jackasses that thinks Capo Caco is better or can be better. The cackasses. No, that's all good. He's not even close to Jack Hughes, that's for sure. Okay, last team and then we're done. The Columbus Blue Jackets, our good pal Corey Morrell. His team, saw them a couple of weeks ago. They got the job done, a win in Ottawa. They're certainly a hardworking team. Patrick Lainey has been red hot for them. I think it's almost a given at this point. Like, if you're Jarmo Kekalainen and company, you have to pay this guy long term to be a part of your core moving forward. Again, they work hard every night, but just not a great year for the Blue Jackets, really up and down. Next year, they could be that team to, grind their way into a playoff spot. But what do we think about the Blue Jackets this season? Yeah, kind of, we didn't expect them to be in a playoff spot, but I'd say that this year is certainly a positive for the Columbus Blue Jackets because they've been so much fun to watch, and probably out of
maybe less than Arizona, but one of the teams that's having the most fun playing spoiler right now is the Columbus Blue Jackets, and they're going to keep doing that because they can really grind and find ways to win hockey games. There's a lot to be excited about there. I think at the beginning of the year, they were the youngest team in the league. They may still be. I'm not 100% sure. The Devils might have taken that title from them, but it's the right step towards a good future for Columbus.
Definitely.
See, for me with Columbus, like we predicted them to be very last in the division, and right now, they're not battling for a playoff spot, but they're in fifth spot. They've got 69 points to Washington's 84. So, and we've known that the top 8 in the East have been set for a while now, but Columbus is sort of on the outside looking in, right in the middle. And I just kind of worry a bit, like if that's where they really want to be, because I feel like, if you're Columbus, shouldn't you be focusing on maybe stocking the cupboards for another year or two, and then sort of going through that accelerated retool to become relevant again? Like, I'm just not sure Columbus grinding and competing right now is a good thing. Like tell me if I'm wrong, but like I think their group is fine, and I think their prospects are good even, but I think they could use a couple more in the next 2 drafts. So I'm not really sure if I love what Columbus is doing right now, sitting in 5th spot in this division.
More draft picks is always better, but I think that they have done a good job drafting, first of all, and I think that they're the opposite of the Rangers in that they've done a very good job at developing their young players into players that are actually making impacts and putting them in areas to succeed, and kind of also taking some guys that you don't necessarily expect to be, they weren't blue chip prospects, but now they're key parts of this team, like Andrew Peak, or I never know how to spell or pronounce his last name, but he's such a key piece of this team now. And it's like, I don't really know where he came from. They just decided, or they found a way to develop him in a way that got him to where he is today. And it's like, I think that they're doing things right. They have, these veteran presences on this team, like a Boone Jenner and Voracek and whoever else you want to throw out there. Bjorkstrand's like one of my favorite players. He's the devil killer. They just sprinkle some rookies amongst these veterans in the league, and it's worked out for them so far. Yep. They've really developed guys in the right way.
No, they've got a nice mix, and talk about a young player who's been a really nice surprise and who has been with them the entire season. Cole Sillinger, one of their first round picks in the previous draft. They've got Kent Johnson coming and other guys. The good thing about this draft is that they have Chicago's pick, and that is going to be a high pick. So that is really good for them. I think when you go on Tankathon, the site where you can check the draft lottery odds, I've done that a few times.
Of course you know that site.
Chicago has the 8th best odds, and that pick belongs to Columbus, obviously from the Jones deal. So they're going to get another high pick. Wow. They've got their own pick as well.
I forgot about that.
And so, it's good. The other thing I will say, I agree, Case. They've done a really good job with drafting and developing. For so long, the problem has been getting guys to commit financially long term. But that is something that I think is really starting to turn around. Rowensky stayed. Merzlikins has stuck around. And the next one is Patrick Lainey. And I think there's a good chance that he does. He seems like a different player this year and just seems more energized. He cares more. And you guys are right. They're having a lot of fun right now. So I like the future for the Blue Jackets.
Yeah, someone they need to keep around is the 5th line. Have you watched any Columbus games? Those fans are friggin' insane. They have the highest attendance in the league, I'm pretty sure. They had the highest in one single game. I know that. It was way above capacity. I guess people were sitting on their significant other's laps or something, or their brother's laps. I don't know what they do in Columbus, but but like, oh my God, the 5th line, that's what they call him, I think.
And the cannon is incredible. Like when the cannon goes off,
it's exciting. It's awesome.
Columbus may not be exactly where NHL players want to live, but to play there, it's got to be pretty fun.
I think they treat their people really well in their organization, and they treat their fans really well. And just quickly before we wrap up on Columbus, other than, of course, Owen Power going to the Sabres last year in that draft, my next favorite moment was when they brought up a season ticket holder, a longtime season ticket holder, to announce one of the first-round picks. What a way to reward a fan who has supported the team for a long time. I think that's awesome. So I wanted to mention that when you guys brought up the fifth line.
Yeah, it's great.
That's pretty cool.
All right, there we go. Revisiting our Metropolitan Division rankings. Of course, we were off on some, we were close on some, but that's the Metropolitan Division for you. And next week we'll finish it off with the Atlantic Division, episode 121. So looking forward to that. Guys, thanks for this, and thanks to our listeners for listening as always, and have yourselves a great week.
This has been another episode of Boys in the Booth with Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams. New episodes every Monday on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Connect with the Boys in the Booth on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Boys in the Booth. Visit boysinthebooth.com for show details, and don't forget, you can become a patron of the podcast for just $1 a month at www.patreon.com/boysinthebooth.